Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me how. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, let's do it now. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, you're the one that makes fishing so much fun. Well, I woke up this morning and I headed for my pond. Meet Mr. Pond Boss, yeah, we're gonna chase the sun. Fired up old Spartan, show where the living breed.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk here, the Pond Boss, checking in from world headquarters of Pond Boss Magazine, Gordonville, Texas. Dick Tabbert's already checking in. Leanne Skipworth, hey Leanne, Todd Austin, Todd. Hey, you got a pretty interesting show going on tonight. I think we're going to have some pretty good meat out there. And John Funk is checking in from mid-Michigan. He sent a question in earlier this week, and I'm going to tackle that one first because it's a really good question. So I'm glad you guys are joining us, and here we go. We're going to get ready and do some pretty fun stuff. I'm going to see if I can find this video on my laptop because there's a little bit of a delay. Because here's the deal: I can see your questions better on the laptop. Oh, look at that! It's already up. Sweet, good gosh, we've already got 12 people up. I didn't even know it. That's super. Bill Russell, hey Bill. Tonight we're going to talk about sampling fish. You know, how do you know what your fishery's doing? So we're going to talk about that. And I really like John Funk's question. John sent me a question. He said, well, hey, I thought I had it written down, but basically it's, what do I need to do with my northern pond to get it ready for winter? Are there some things that we need to do? So I'm going to tackle that. Looks like Troy Todd's in. Attaboy, Troy. Good to see you, man. And it looks like Robin Adams, Tyler Stubbs, Fisheries Biologist, is here. You know, I try to acknowledge everybody, and there's people that kind of slip by me. Kevin Nance, first time he's made it in for the live show. Good to see you, Kevin. Kevin's, he's seen enough of them archived and recorded. He knows the drill. If you guys don't know the drill, here's what I want you to do. I want you to put hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section. Click like, but the most important thing is for you to share that video, share this video on your timeline, because we need to build an audience. And if we'll do that, I'll keep doing these things because they're really kind of fun. Let's see, I see Lance Faber checking in, Cameron Lusk checking in. Cameron Lusk, we have the same last name. I guess we must be related. Oh wait, that's my son that lives in Alabama. Hey Cam, good to see you, buddy. Pond Boss Magazine, guess what? This is pretty cool. The September-October issue is in the house. It's here. And if you haven't seen Pond Boss yet, you really need to. For those of you that can't read, we have a lot of really good pictures, a lot of good stuff in it. This time, we've got Dave Beasley with Solitude Lake Management wrote an article about making assumptions in pond management. That's not a good thing. You know, Michael Gray, Earth Mover. Michael will be checking in here in a little bit. I'm sure he doesn't miss many of these shows. He's got a great story in here about building a core trench, which that's a big deal if you're going to build a pond. I wrote a story about how to cull, which I'm going to talk about that here in just a little bit. Hit that a little. Speaking of Michael Gray, he just checked in. Michael, I was just telling people about your article in this issue of the magazine. Right there it is. There's Michael's article. The September-October magazine is in the house. It's in mailboxes. So normally we're a little bit late. This time we're a little bit early. My good friend Dan Van Skyke, The Value of Riparian Zones. So there you go. $35 a year, folks. This is what fuels the economy of Pond Boss so that we can do things like this with this show. Also, you know, part of our mission is to help you be a better steward of your land and water. So to that end, we do the best we can to provide good information. Hey, there's Russell Wright. Hey, Mr. Wright, Dr. Wright, good to see you, buddy. Glad to see you're on board. We've got all kinds of stuff on the Pond Boss website. We've got this book, got a lot of great photos, but more than that, it's got all kinds of fantastic information about how to build a pond, how to shop for land. If anybody's shopping for land, you need this book. Mike Otto's book, Just Add Water. That's on the Pond Boss website. So here's your resources. You've got Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year. It's less than you spend for dinner on a Friday night or a Saturday night. You've got the pondboss.com, On pondboss.com, we have a discussion forum where you can ask questions and get answers just within minutes. It's good stuff. Have this Facebook page. On the Pond Boss website, we've got not only the forum, but we've got all kinds of free articles. All these videos are archived, as well as on our Facebook page. So there's a lot of free stuff, but there's stuff that we don't talk about free that comes in this magazine just because they're a little proprietary. But listen, I had somebody come by the office earlier this week, and we were just having a chit chat, and he said, doesn't it bother you to tell people all this stuff that you've learned over a lifetime? And my response to that is absolutely not. Here's the way I see it. If I've learned something and I don't share it with you, shame on me. And here's my point. Even though I'm in business to make a profit, which I have to do that, I don't live off of a paycheck somewhere. If I don't create business, I don't get paid. Well, here's the thing. Let's just talk about ponds in just Texas for a minute. In Texas, there's 1.2 million private ponds and lakes. My little company, Bob Lusk Outdoors, manages maybe 350 of those. 350. And there's maybe 20 companies scattered across the state. It used to be 3. And if there's 20 of them, and let's say they even manage 1,000 ponds apiece, there's 20,000. That is a fraction of the bodies of water that are out there. So I think it's incumbent on guys like me to share what we know with folks like you, so you can be better stewards of your land and water. And if that happens, I feel pretty good about that. But I also know this, it's not what you do for a living. So the more that you know, the better client you're going to make for us and for Pond Boss advertisers and vendors. So that's why I'm really pretty free with what I try to tell people. Kevin Briggs, good to see you, buddy. So what I'm going to talk about tonight, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with John Funk's question, I think, because it's such a good, thoughtful question. John's from mid-Michigan, which I presume that's not the upper peninsula, but that's somewhere in the middle of the lower peninsula, I guess. I don't know. John, my apologies. I've looked you up before, and I don't remember because I look up a lot of people. What do you do to get a northern pond ready for winter? Well, here's the number one thing. This is the most important thing. Be sure that your water is clean and happy and healthy. Joseph Reynolds is checking in. Mike Cottrell, Dave Gruenwald from Illinois. So, John, as long as your water is happy and healthy going into the winter, then your risk of winter kill diminishes. Let me tell you what that means. Water that's extremely fertile, has a lot of vegetation, or has a lot of plankton or algae growth, those are the ones that are most susceptible to winter kill. Now, let's define winter kill for a minute before I take off on that tangent on how to take care of northern waters. Winter kill is basically a layer of ice forms on top of a pond. Water can only get oxygen from 2 sources. One is contact with the atmosphere. So when that pond freezes over, that eliminates contact with the atmosphere. The other way is from photosynthesis from plants. So if there's a lot of plants under the water and the sun can penetrate through the ice, then those plants can produce oxygen during daylight hours. Now keep in mind that over the wintertime, daylight's shorter, nights are longer, especially the further north we go. So the span of time for photosynthesis to occur is a lot less in the wintertime, especially in the northern months, than what we have in the south. So in order to prepare your pond for wintertime, the water needs to be as healthy as it can be. Now in that case, it doesn't mean your water needs to be sterile, but you need to pretty much have your nutrients bound into something that sequesters itself on the bottom. Now, here's what that means in English. If you've got a plankton bloom now, that plankton bloom needs to die off in the winter and fall to the bottom, and your water needs to be pretty clear and pretty clean. The way you do that is by aerating it right now. So if you're aerating that water, you're processing organic waste that doesn't consume oxygen. You're utilizing a plankton bloom that creates and disseminates oxygen, and through respiration and through photosynthesis. But as the temperature cools and that plankton bloom dies and drops to the bottom, that's a good thing. So keeping your water moving right now, whether it's with circulators, fountains, or bottom diffused aeration. That's the number one thing you can do to help keep your water clean. So now, what about the fishery? Well, I tell you this. I used to talk to Dr. Dave Willis about this a lot. Dr. Willis was one of my very best friends. He passed away several years ago. He was the department head at South Dakota State University, had an outstanding fisheries department back then. Brad Rom, Pete Gogger. I see your question there, Pete. I'll come back to it in a minute. Does prolonged rain have a positive or negative impact on oxygen? That's a great question. I'll answer that here in a minute. So, and Dave and I used to talk about, he kept saying, with winter kill, with all these prairie potholes in the Dakotas, we can't manage this water because we know that at some point there's going to be a winter kill. So what's the point? Landowners don't want to stock the fish because they know at some point the fish are going to die. Well, if you're aerating and moving that water around, then you're going to reduce the risk of winter kill. Now, one of the things John asked me is, should we be aerating any part of the pond? Well, I've got several thoughts about that. I'm going to tell you, yes, I think it's a good idea to aerate. Now, here's the catch-22. If you move the water too fast, it gets too cold. Think about this. When you've got a layer of ice sitting on top of a pond, that ice is 32 degrees or colder, correct? Nod your head. Y'all get that. That's right. Water below that has to be warmer than 32 degrees or it would be ice. Water is its most dense at 39 degrees, which means the water on the bottom of your northern ponds are typically going to be 39 or 40 degrees. So the objective is to make sure that that water under the ice does not run out of oxygen. But if you aerate it too vigorously, then you're going to get the temperature to drop. So what I like to do is aerate water in the northern ponds shallower and if you're going to have a hole in the ice, make it safe. I hear stories every year about a kid falling through the ice or animals falling through a hole in the ice. You guys in the north. John Wilson, you just joined up. You got that. Christopher Aguilar, what's up? What's up with you? Susie Nugent, good to see you. So I think, and you need to talk to guys like John Wilson. John, Aquadoc, he's got it. Hey, Jacob West, good to see you, buddy. Yeah, I do want to come see you in October. So we'll be talking here before long, set a date on that. Jacob is building a lake over west of where I live. But anyway, back to the northern ponds. If you can aerate fairly close to the shore and not cause the temperature of the water in the deeper part to drop too low, then I think that's a smart thing. Another thing is, I think you need to be preparing your pond for ice fishing right now, which means go buy a few fathead minnows and drop them off, every couple of weeks. Shoot some 5 or 10 pounds of fathead minnows down where those bluegills or bass, where they're going to be lingering under the ice in the wintertime. You can chum them up if you want to, and then in the winter, drill a hole, dump a few fathead minnows down in there, and you can chum your fish where you can have better ice fishing. So yeah, there's a number of things you can do. Job number one in northern ponds is to make sure your water is as clean and healthy and happy as possible. You do that by moving it and making sure that you don't go into the winter with a lot of living aquatic plants. If you can do that, you stand a better chance of success. I see Maddie Wilson checking in. She's got the hashtag Pond Boss magazine. Steve Lewis, Fisheries Biologist, Hot Springs, Arkansas. Good to see you, Steve. So, John, if you've got more questions, type it up and send it to me here in a minute. Tom Davis, good to see you, buddy. All right, so I'm going to go back to Pete Gogger's question here right quick. Does prolonged rain have a positive or negative impact on oxygen levels in a pond? Prolonged rain, water receives oxygen from two sources. It receives oxygen from the atmosphere, and it receives oxygen from plant life in the water, whether it's microscopic algae or it's rooted aquatic plants or floating aquatic plants. As they photosynthesize, they're injecting oxygen into the water. Now this time of year, our daylight hours are longer than the nighttime hours, so oxygen this time of year is about as high as it can get unless there's something sucking the oxygen out, such as a pond turnover or a plankton crash, or if you kill too much aquatic plant life at one time, where something can consume oxygen faster than the water can absorb oxygen. Look at water like a sponge. it can absorb oxygen, and it absorbs it from the atmosphere. And keep in mind, we could take 200,000 people and pack them into a giant soccer stadium somewhere in the world. We won't run out of oxygen. But try to do that with fish, doesn't work. Fish need more space because water can't absorb as much oxygen as the atmosphere provides. There's Leo Wynn checking in from the left coast. Good to see you, Leo. So where I'm going with that is that prolonged rain probably doesn't have a negative impact on oxygen levels in a pond by itself. So here's the qualifier. When you have prolonged rain, that water's plummeting through the atmosphere. It's absorbing oxygen on its way down. As a matter of fact, water is absorbing carbon dioxide, absorbing oxygen, hydrogen, and when it hits a pond and runs into a pond, it's actually adding oxygen, but it's also dropping the pH. Rain is almost always acidic because of what it's absorbing in gases from the atmosphere as it falls through the atmosphere to hit the water, hit your pond. Now, here's how prolonged rain can have a negative impact on oxygen levels. When that rain hits, if you've got 60-degree rain falling onto a 90-degree pond and it's prolonged, it's going to drop the temperature. This time of year, when you get that event, then you're going to get cooler water mixing into your warmer water, which is going to cool your pond down, which could cause the turnover. That's what could cause the oxygen numbers to go down or the oxygen concentration to go down. So that's what could cause it. But even though the prolonged rain drops the temperature, that's not what causes oxygen to drop. So the direct answer to your question is that prolonged rain will not deplete oxygen or increase oxygen. It will probably help it keep status quo. It's the temperature that will change the oxygen in that pond. Let's see here. Holy cow, we got a lot of stuff going on. Randy Raymer, hey Bob, if you get to my question about all the small bluegill and largemouth, some have suggested walleye and others have said no. Your thoughts? Okay, yep, I'm fixing to hit your question here in just a minute. Jim Liner checking in from Alabama. Great info for you guys up north. Hello to Rusty Wright at Auburn. We love Rusty Wright. Rusty's been at some of the Pond Boss conferences in the past. War Eagle, Jim Liner at Ray Scott. So War Eagle, you must be an Auburn fan. Folks, I will never, ever, ever, ever forget being at Ray Scott's house when my Texas A&M Aggies, fresh into the SEC, played Alabama in Alabama and beat them. That was some of the most fun I've ever had. And I love Alabama, but you know what? I kind of love my Aggies as well. Randy, you know what? Let's go ahead and hit Randy's question right quick. So Randy's from Waterloo, Illinois, which is corn country, I do believe, farm country. Randy says, we have a 5-acre lake with a lot of small bluegill and a lot of largemouth bass. Most of them are 6 inches and smaller. Any suggestions? Well, here's the way that works, Randy. Largemouth bass, bluegill are the backbone of the food chain where you are. Now, you may only get 3 spawns a year of bluegill, where I am in North Texas, we'll get 5 spawns of bluegill per year. But bluegill are the backbone of the food chain for your largemouth bass. So what happens over a long period of time, let's just take a pond that's freshly stocked. We're going to put some fish in. Christopher Aguilar, go Tigers. We got an LSU fan. Mike Augustine checking in. John Funk, at what point should you stop feeding temperature-wise? We're supposed to have a mild winter. John, I'll tell you this. Stop feeding your fish when they stop eating your food. I can't make it any simpler than that. Feed the fish till they quit eating. Now, in northern ponds, the more you feed, the more waste you have trapped under the water. So I would make sure that all your fish food is being consumed. So I want to go back to Randy here. Randy's got a 5-acre lake with a lot of small bluegill, a lot of largemouth bass that are mostly 6 inches and smaller. One unknown that I don't have here, Randy, is how old your bass are. If those bass are less than 3 years old, they just haven't had time to grow where you are in Illinois. I would tell you this. When a pond is first stocked, if it's stocked properly, we put the forage fish in, give them a chance to grow, reproduce, and expand their numbers and mass. Then we stock the bass in there. So now we're 18 months. Here's what we have. 2 years. By the time we get to the 3rd year, we're here. Forage fish, bass. And as the bass get to this point and they get to here, then the forage fish numbers drop like this. At that point, you got to be harvesting bass. I'm going to give you a safe recommendation. Start calling those 6-inch bass. Get as many of those out as you can. Start feeding your bluegills. You've got another 90 days of good weather. You can feed the bluegills. Feed Purina's Aquamax MVP. And you know what? I'm glad you said that, and I'm glad I said that. I thank Purina for being a sponsor of Pond Boss. Texas Hunter, thank you for being a sponsor of Pond Boss. They help make sure we can do this show. I love Purina Feeds. I started working with those guys in 1995. They were real interested in developing new products for our industry, for recreational fishing, ponds. And so you can buy some really, really good fish foods. So Randy said the lake is old since 1914. Okay, since the lake's 1914, those bass are 103 years old. Hope you're laughing at that because that's a joke. Start culling as many bass as you can and feed your bluegill. If you'll feed your bluegill, they'll reproduce more. You'll get more small bluegill, which will feed some of the remaining bass. But here's what's going to happen, and this happens almost every time in stunted bass lakes. Listen to this. This is real important. The bass that are in there now won't amount to much. The more of those you can cull to make room for young fish, the young fish are going to be the ones that are going to grow up and get big. So start culling as many bass. If you want, hey, raise your hand if you want to catch 6-inch bass. Nobody's raising their hand. Well, the bottom line is, you might be a good candidate to renovate your lake. Also, Randy, examine the habitat. If you don't have really, really good habitat to support largemouth bass and bluegill, that's your starting point. So I think it could be a real wise idea to consider renovating that lake. What that means is go in and kill what you've got, restock, and start over. And for 5 acres, you know, that instead of trying to unpickle the pickle, I mean, when you take a cucumber, put it in vinegar, it's a pickle. It's really hard to undo that. The same thing with a pond that's full of overcrowded bass, overcrowded bluegill. So I would consider renovating it. If you want more details about that, email me at info@pondboss.com and I'll turn you on to some folks that can help. Let's see here. So there's your 2 choices, Randy. You can cull some bass, feed the bluegill, and try to correct it, or you can renovate and start over. Now, as far as your question about, what was it, stocking some walleye, I don't think that'll help. I mean, you're top heavy with predators as it is. You know, if you had too many bait fish that the walleye could eat, then maybe it could help. But if you had that, and you had enough bass, 12, 14 inches long, they'd be taking care of those bluegills. So you have, and of course, I'm sitting here online on Facebook answering questions about something I've not seen. Jim Liner just said, at that Alabama-Texas A&M game in our living room, I saw Bob Luss jump 3 feet in the air. I've only jumped 3 feet in the air once in my entire life. My vertical jump was when the Aggies scored to beat Alabama, which was really fun. Let's see here. There were some questions that came in on the Pond Boss forum about sampling, so I'll tackle those in a minute. Hey, Leo's got a question. How about warm days with rain as kinetic energy disperses into the water body in form of heat, possibly increasing water temperature, reducing the O2 level near the surface? Kinetic energy with water hitting water, I don't see a lot of that happening. And of course, I understand your question, but here's the answer I'm going to give you. I have seen pond temperatures drop 10 degrees in 20 minutes with a 4-inch rain in the summertime in West Texas. So that's a significant drop. 10-degree temperature because rain hits it, especially in a hailstorm where there's ice involved. But just strictly rain, I don't know that the kinetic energy disperses enough heat into the water to affect the temperature. Most of the time when you've got those long-term, several-day rain events like he was talking about, you're going to see the temperature of the water decline significantly over whatever that period of time is. And that's what causes the oxygen depletion. David White, in the larger lake, would it help to stock large catfish such as flatheads or blues to help cull some of the smaller bass? No. Here's the thing. When you stock large catfish, such as flatheads, flathead catfish are going to eat everything they can possibly eat. And they're going to grow. A flathead, let me tell you this, I have studied flathead catfish. I've been mesmerized by those dadgum things, and I've watched a 20-pound catfish, flathead, eat a 3-pound bass. I have watched it kill a 1-pound bass and not eat it, just to protect its territory. So if you have overcrowded bass, the answer isn't to use flatheads or blue cats, because blue cats and flatheads are more aggressive than blue cats. Blue cats are going to get bigger than flatheads. I've seen a 50-pound blue cat swallow a 3-pound bass whole. So when you think about using catfish as the predator to control overcrowded bass, you're trading problems. I'll never forget, I worked on a club lake down south of Houston back in the early 80s, and their complaint was it was a bass fishing club, and their objective was to grow some great big, back in the early 80s, an 8 to 10 pound bass was huge, and that was about the time the Florida bass in Texas were really gaining a foothold. We were starting to see some 11s, 12s, 13s, and 14s like that. And what was going on with this 25-acre club lake is the anglers were getting mad because their gear kept getting torn up because they were catching huge blue cat. So we went and sampled this lake, and sure enough, there was enough blue cat. This lake was adjacent to a fish hatchery, and the proprietors of the fish hatchery had stocked a bunch of blue cat there years ago. Just they had extras, didn't have a place to put them. Let's put them in there. So they ended up growing a whole bunch of huge blue cat that were decimating the bass population. So I would not be using blue cats or flatheads as my control. If you could go get them after they did their job, home run, but you can't. There's no guarantees that you're ever going to be able to harvest a blue cat or a flathead and keep them from becoming detrimental down the road. Jason Nepstad. All right, let's see here. Christopher Aguilar. What about them little black catfish that come from the ditches in the farmer's field, but they find their way into the ponds? Well, those are bullheads. In the northern part of the planet, they're on the menus of some fine restaurants in the spring, but then they take them off because bullheads are also called mudcats. They make a living on the bottom of a pond, feeding on everything else that everybody else already ate or in the detritus and things. However, bullheads are predators. We were electrofishing a lake not far from where I live a couple of years ago. We shocked up about a 3/4 pound bullhead catfish that had a 4-inch gizzard shad in its gullet. Explain that. So they're predators as well as bottom feeders. So we have those, and most people consider them trash fish. Of course, there's some ponds that are so nasty that's the only fish that can live in it, and if that's what you got and you like it, it's okay with me. Mike Cottrell, what about channel cats? What about using channel cats as predators? They're really not that effective. They will eat bluegills. Once a channel cat hits about 2.5 pounds, then they're competing with your largemouth bass. So if you've got too many bass, probably the smartest thing to do is to bring in an electrofishing boat, and I'm going to talk about sampling here in a minute, or cull by angling. There's a catch-22 with the culling by angling. Christopher Aguilar, so dynamite, yeah, blow up a couple of ditches and send those bullheads up into the sky so they can land on an alligator's back down there in South Louisiana. Dynamite is pretty fun, though. I've had a chance to do that, not to kill fish, but to blow out a bunch of debris in a pond. That was pretty fun. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Commercial, holy cow, Pond Boss Magazine, $35 a year. There's a card inside that tells you how to subscribe. There it is. Holy cow, my picture's on it. I know the editor. Great articles. This is the September, October. If you guys would like to have a sample copy of the magazine, send an info@pondboss.com email. Give us your address, and we'll send you a sample copy so you can check it out. Then you can subscribe to it. By the way, let's see, we had a drawing. Holy cow, I need to find that. Leanne gave it to me. What'd I do with it? Bear with me a minute. Oh, here it is. If you will, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine, click like and share this video to your newsfeed. You're eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and a Pond Boss mug. Who doesn't want one of those? Oh, put your hands down. Everybody wants one of those. This week's winner is Bill Russell from Satsuma, Alabama. Now, we don't have your address, Bill, so if you're watching this show, email your address. By the way, we still need addresses for Kyle Edwards and Jeff Hoffman. I'm not going to go chase addresses. If you guys would like to have these fine little items, send us your address when you're the winner. All right. Hey, there's Vince Beard, Nacogdoches, Texas. I know some of the beards over there. Good to see you there, Vince. Let's see here. All right, now I'm going to tackle some questions that came from the Pond Boss Forum, and I do want to talk about sampling fish. When you have a pond, it's a good idea for you to try to figure out how to sample your fish and figure out if they're doing well. Well, there's all kinds of methods. With a professional fisheries biologist like me, like my guys in, Solitude, Lake Management Services, Midwest Lake Management, Southeastern Pond Management, we all have electrofishing boats. Now, all these sampling tools I'm going to tell you about in a minute have limits. Electrofishing boats are outstanding for shallow water, around the edges of a pond, water less than 6 feet deep. It's vegetated, works great on any fish that live in that region of a pond or a lake. So when we're getting ready to sample a pond or a lake, we want to make sure that we can get a good, accurate sample. Now, when we're sampling, we want to collect enough of the different size classes of the different species of fish to be able to make a good decision on what to do. Do we need to cull fish? Do we need to stock fish? Do we need to bump up our feeders? Do we need to add feeders? Should we fertilize that pond in the spring to increase survival rates of young in the year? Should we plant plants? So there's a lot of decisions, but the data that we collect helps us make those recommendations to make that a better fishery. So for the do-it-yourselfers out there, one of the most important things you can do is keep really accurate records of fish that you catch. Lengths and weights. Now, if you really want to get a little bit more scientific about it, buy some tags. A tagging gun is not expensive. It's $25. It's the same kind of tagging gun you see at Walmart where they're putting those little plastic T-shaped doohickeys into socks and underwear, etc. So the tags, they're called Floy tags, F-L-O-Y. If you will catch some fish and tag them, weigh them and measure them, write it down. Make a log of that. When you start, let's say you go out and you have 3 good days of fishing in the next 10 days and you catch 50 bass. If you will weigh and measure those fish and tag them, then release them, then you can start to get some data that's pretty useful for you. Here's the first thing that you get. When you are Jason Nepstad, where can I buy tags that cheap? Look up Floy tags online. There's a number of companies that sell them, and they're easy to get. And you'll need one tagging gun and with a few needles. Buy extra needles, guys. Those needles don't stay sharp forever. And the tags are cheap. So, cheap, I guess, relatively speaking. There's Dion Myers and Fred Bingaman checking in. So what you want to do is you want to track lengths and weights of all the fish that you catch. Now, when you tag those fish, write down the tag number and put it in your log right beside the length and weight of those fish and the date that you caught it. Because when you catch that fish again, you're going to want to weigh it and measure it and compare it to what it was when you first tagged it. Now, here's one of the deals about angling sampling. You're only going to be able to capture the fish you can catch hook and line. So change your techniques. If you're going to fish for bluegill, use a little bitty hook with an earthworm. Use a circle hook so they don't swallow the hook. Keep a count. Lengths and weights are always a good idea. Now, when we're managing lakes professionally, we're using the electrofishing boat. That's our number one tool. But we may also use gill nets. We may use seines. Now, you can use a seine. If you want to go to Walmart and buy a 10-foot seine, here's how you do that. Tie a broom handle on each end. Get somebody a little bit taller than the water is deep. And pull the seine, go to the shoreline, pull the seine out, pull it around in a 90-degree arc, and then pick it up and see what you got in it. Now, if you don't know the fish you're catching, take some pictures so you can get a positive identification later. What a seine pool does in 4 or 5 places around a 1-acre pond, for example, that's going to tell you what kind of reproduction you've had and how successful your fish have spawned that year. You'll be able to see young of the year fish, baby bluegills, baby minnows, baby shiners, baby bass, baby red ear, baby green, baby bullheads, whatever you've got. And do that in the summertime. That's a good thing to do. Now, we use shoreline seining, especially where electrofishing isn't quite as effective and where we have shallow water, so we can go in and find young of the year fish so we can monitor and document how well the fish have reproduced. Another method is using gill nets. Now, we use what's called experimental gill nets that are usually 250 feet long. Now, they're in 50-foot panels. So the first 50-foot panel will be 1/2-inch mesh. The next one will be 3/4, 1, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 3/4, or 2. Or it'll be 1/2 inch, 1, 1 1/2, 2, 2 1/2, 3. And what we'll do is we'll set those gill nets to go out from the shore with the small mesh near the shore going perpendicular to the shore of the lake, going out into deeper water. And we leave those out for 3 or 4 hours at a time after dark. So we're checking those gill nets because you can pretty well bet that when you catch a fish in a gill net, it's going to die. We've got a lake we were sampling up in Oklahoma where we had stocked a few walleye earlier in the year. We stocked some 6 to 8 inch walleye and we set a gill net. We'd only stocked like 500 in a 60-acre lake, and we caught 10 of those in a gill net, and they had tripled their size in 7 months. We caught them in a gill net. So the mixed emotions were that we lost them in the gill net, but they were thrilled with the growth rates. That impacted their decision to stock more coming up this fall. So we're going to be stocking more of those this fall. So a gill net, if you're going to use a gill net, you need to run it pretty often. Pull it in, get the fish out, weigh and measure, do a good count, and write it down. Keeping good records on sampling is a smart idea. There's also fight nets. Fight nets are like a big hoop net, you know, that's shaped where there might be 5 compartments in it and the end of it's tied together. But with the round, the part at the end of the net may be 36 inches in diameter, but when the fish swims through that first compartment, they go through a hole about this big. If they swim through that compartment, they go through a hole about this big in a V-shaped cone. Hope I'm describing this well enough for you to get the picture. There's like 5 compartments in the fight net. So when they make it through the first one, they swim through a little hole to get to the second compartment. Then they go to the third one, fourth one, and fifth one based on the size of the fish. And the mesh of a fight net is about 1/2 inch. So smaller fish than that can escape. So basically we're trying to catch fish that are moving along a shoreline. We'll set a fight net parallel to the shore, and it's got wings that come out. One wing comes into the shore, another wing goes out toward deeper water. That way fish swimming parallel to the shore hit the wings and turn and go into the net. And typically that's a good one to use if you want to see what kind of fish are moving around. And most of the time we're catching bluegills and crappie and some bass. That's what we typically catch with that sampling method. You guys throw me some questions here. I got a few more questions. But those are the basic sampling tools. You can use angling. You can use fight nets. You can use seine nets. You can do some sampling of your own. The main thing is keep good data, because when you get that underwater snapshot at that moment, you want to be able to compare the fish you're catching then of the ratios of fish that you're catching, the species of fish that you're catching, and the body condition of the fish that you're catching. If you can do that and compare that 6 months, a year, 2 years, 2.5 years, then you can make really smart decisions on whether you need to stock more fish, harvest fish, whatever you need to do. All right, Dick Tabber says, I'd like to get rid of some big catfish. I have too many. Well, it sounds like we need to have a fishing derby at your house, Dick. You know, I tell you what I've done in the past. When I come across somebody that's got too many fish and we know that they need to harvest some, we can use the electrofishing boat, but it's way, way more fun to bring the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, you know, a church group, underprivileged kids, which there's some liabilities with all that, but it's not hard to overcome that, and give those kids a chance to catch the first fish they've ever seen. Let's see, Jason Nepstad says, how do you spell Fyke net? F-Y-K-E, Fyke, F-Y-K-E, Fyke net. Memphis Net and Twine. Oh gosh, there's 4 or 5 different companies that sell those. And if you're going to get very serious about sampling, that's a good idea. And by the way, Jason, we're putting together a trip to North Carolina in late October, early November. We're going to be working on Richmond Mill Lake. I think it's November 5, 6, 7 through there somewhere. So if you guys want to have us come by and take a look at your lakes or your lake, you know, we'd be happy to figure that out with you guys. Speaking of that, you know, seeing as how we're in the fisheries business, I do want to solicit some business. So we're getting ready to do several road trips. One road trip will be from north of Dallas-Fort Worth to Memphis, Tennessee, Nashville to North Carolina, and then back. So if you're along that corridor and you'd like us to come by and take a look at your lake, we do it for a fee, then we'd be glad to help try to figure out if we can do that. We're also going to make a trip from here up towards St. Louis. Probably go to see Fred Bingaman if we can, which I think we're going to be able to do that, Fred. I promised to call you. I still promise to call you. I will ring your number here in a few days. We're going to be traveling up to Purina Mills. I've got to give a speech up there on Tuesday, Wednesday of next week at Gray's Summit. So I'll be ringing your number before long. So if you need some service or need some help, we're happy to do that. If you don't, then we're happy to answer some questions. Okay, David White says, how do you know which species of fish to cull and what size of fish to cull? Great question. If you will weigh and measure some fish, you can compare your fish to the standards for that species of fish. Here's a good way to look at it. Let's just take largemouth bass. A 10-inch largemouth bass should weigh about 10 ounces. 12-inch largemouth bass should weigh about 12 ounces. A 14-inch largemouth bass should weigh about 1 pound 7 ounces. 16-inch bass should weigh 2 1/4. 18-inch bass 3 1/4. If your bass are consistently under those standard weights, that's the size classes of bass that you need to be culling. And if the body condition of your fish is declining, you need to be culling or figuring out how to utilize your fish to cull more. Tyler Stubbs, what's your opinion on grass carp? I love grass carp. The way I see grass carp, Tyler, is they are a tool in the toolbox. Now, grass carp, I think where grass carp if they have a bad name is because of the people that used them in the wrong way. You know, one of the old school examples is Lake Conroe, where they were grossly overstocked and just eradicated all the plant life in that lake back in 1979, 80, 81, through there somewhere. But I think grass carp are an outstanding tool, especially triploids that can't reproduce. And there's only been a couple of watersheds where diploid grass carp can reproduce in the United States. They've got to have real specific circumstances to spawn. But here's where people mess up with grass carp. They overstock them, or they put them in there expecting them to eat plants that they won't eat. So, looking at grass carp as a tool in our toolkit, if we know that there's plants they can eat, then they're a good resource to use. Now, another one of the caveats about grass carp, in my opinion, is that when somebody calls us and think they want to stock grass carp, it's because they have a severe vegetation problem. That severe vegetation problem took 5 years to get that way. Well, they want to fix it today. Well, there's no chance I'm going to stock enough grass carp in a pond to eradicate all those plants that took 3, 4, 5 years to clog up their waterway. But what I will do is I'll stock, 3 to 5 per acre and use a herbicide to decrease the volume of plant life that's in that pond and let the grass carp catch up with it. Because I don't really want them to eat all the plants, depending on the species. David White, how do you get rid of the grass carp when too many have been stocked? That's a great question because they're not easy to electrofish. Bow and arrow, when they come up and start eating the edges off people's lawns and pulling, limbs off of willow trees, what I tell most people is don't overstock them. Stock the number that you need. If you need more, it's easier to add more than it is to say, oh, wait, I put in too many. Now, here's the good news, is they only live 12 to 14 years. Why is that good news? They lose their efficiency after about 5 or 6 years. Well, yes, they still eat plants. They're not as efficient once they hit 25 or 30 pounds as they were when they were 5 or 6 pounds. So, there's not an efficient way to get rid of too many grass carp unless you're just proactive and try to shoot them. They're hard to capture in an electrofishing boat. Okay, let's see here. Here's some questions from the Pond Boss Forum. Frank James, Anthropic from Houghton, Louisiana, got a pond in East Texas. What temperature here would be considered ideal for an electrofishing survey? We would like it cool enough to get more fish shallow, but fear that we leave too long like last year when severe cold snaps in October mess things up. Well, here's the thing. With electrofishing, you're only going to catch fish that are in water 6 feet deep or less. So electrofishing surveys, especially in ponds that have a lot of deep water, we like to do that when the water temperature's in the upper 60s to the upper 70s. That's when fish tend to be migrating into shallow water to feed heavily in the fall before we go into the winter. So that's a really good time to electrofish. Now, what we got to do is we got to catch a statistical number enough that we can make a good decision. Now, here's what that means to guys like me. If we can catch, let's just take a large amount of bass. If we can catch electrofishing somewhere between 40 and 80 largemouth bass per hour of electrofishing, that's an adequate sample because we can weigh and measure those fish and then have a confident recommendation on whether you should catch and release, stock more fish, or if you should be culling fish. And at 40 to 80, 80 is getting a little bit high. 40 is about where it ought to be if you're trying to grow some really big fish. So if we can catch between 40 and 80 per hour electrofishing, that's enough. That water temperature, we've shocked lakes with temperatures as low as the 40s. That's too cold. Except in the most shallow ponds, then we can get a pretty effective sample. So I'm going to tell you low 60s to upper 70s is a good time to electrofish. That's a real good time. Eric West, our good friend, natural resource attorney from Jackson, Mississippi, the librarian on the Pond Boss discussion forum, Ask the Boss. A general overview of electrofishing and what it shows, the percentage of fish sampled, the temperature effect, and the stress on fish, and electrofishing used as a harvest tool. Good stuff. So, electrofishing is loud. Fish run from it. If we can catch somewhere close to 10% of the fish population in any given body of water, we've done a great job. And that's enough statistically to tell us what needs to be done with that fishery. If we're catching, I'm just going to tell you, I don't think there's many ponds on the planet, unless they're all less than 8 feet deep, with structure where fish congregate. Odds of catching more than 10% of the fish in any one electrofishing excursion, odds are low. But for sampling, that's adequate. We can make some good decisions from that. He says the temperature effect. Well, the temperature effect is fish do run from the noise, but their instinct to hold closer to shallow water in cooler temperatures, meaning, here's what that means, going back to what I said a while ago, from the low 60s to the mid or upper 70s, that's the best time to electrofish because the fish have migrated up into that top 6 feet of water. So when we're electrofishing, we're taking random samples, typically around the perimeter of a pond. However, we will zigzag across a pond looking for things like threadfin shad or baby gizzard shad or other fish that frequent that open water that might be a little deeper. Now, typically our results are low. We don't catch a lot of fish out in the open water, but where there's structure, cover, habitat, spawning beds, that's where we'll get the best samples. Tell you this, if we're shocking along we have a Smith Root research boat that's 18 feet long. I can carry 8 people in it comfortably, giant live well. It's a very efficient boat that does great work in soft water up to fairly conductive water. Then if we hit a spawning bed where all of a sudden it looks like popcorn, a bluegill at a 3/4 of a pound rolling up, I back off and leave them there because I know they're spawning and I want to leave them alone. All right, so stress on the fish. Well, when you're electrofishing in hot weather, there's greater stress on the fish because hot water has a lower affinity for oxygen than cooler water. But when we're electrofishing, and all the good biologists that have excellent equipment have a big live well. Ours is recirculating water from the lake. We're continually pumping water into our live well. Now, once we get a big enough sample that we need to stop, we'll stop, weigh and measure the fish, count them, look at the size classes. And here's what we're doing when we're electrofishing. We want to capture enough game fish, whether it's smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, tiger muskies, walleye, whatever, so that we can weigh them and measure them so that it's statistically accurate so we can make good recommendations on harvest limits and harvest creel sizes, things like that. But we're also looking at the size classes. We're looking for those young of the year bluegill that are 3/4 of an inch to an inch. We're looking at those that are 3 inches, 5 inches. We're looking at the different size classes and the ratios of those size classes, comparatively speaking, to all the species of fish. Now, you might need to rewind and listen to that again, but what we're trying to figure out is we're comparing the ratios of the different sizes of the different species of fish, comparing that to the body condition. Are they fat? Are they skinny? Are they average? And once we can deduce that data and analyze it, that can help us decide whether or not you need to be culling those 10 to 12 inch bass, which you should. Kevin Smith from Zachary, Louisiana on the Pond Boss Forum Ask the Boss says, I'm going to dovetail off of Eric West's questions above and ask you to address whether or not electrofishing can be used effectively to cull undesirable species such as bullhead, carp, huge gizzard, shad, and etc. Seems like a better solution than rope known if it would work. No. Electrofishing is a sampling tool. That's it. It's not a good harvest tool. Now, here's your caveat. When the carp are spawning up in shallow water, if the person has that electrofishing boat is willing to come out there from dusk until about 2 in the morning and shock shallow water where carp are spawning, you can make an impact. Now, harvesting bass, you can harvest enough bass with an electrofishing boat, which I think is a smart idea, but what you can't do is you can't control numbers. I mean, if you're only shocking up 10% of a fishery at one point, you know, that may be enough largemouth bass to have an impact, but you're not going to eradicate fish with electrofishing. Now, you can manage fish with electrofishing, especially if you do it more than once, 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, then absolutely yes, you can. I have seen times where gizzard shad, for example, in the wintertime will congregate around a dock. And if that landowner calls and says, hey man, I got all these shad gathered up around my dock, can you come get them? Then we drop what we're doing and go, that can make an impact. But that is one day out of 365. So odds are that you're not going to be able to make it, you're not going to eradicate any fishery with an electrofishing boat. You can manage it, but you can't eradicate the fish. All right, let's see here. Jim Liner, good info about grass carp. Thank you very much. Jason, what do carp need to breed? Grass carp, well, here's what grass carp need to be able to breed. It's really complex because they're native to the Amur River in Asia, and that river has everything that these fish need to breed. Here's what they need to breed in nature. And I'll circle back and tell you how they're bred here. But they need moving water where the adult carp can swim upstream, lay their eggs in water that's got a slight salinity content. Then those eggs tumble with a current. Then when they hatch and begin to absorb the yolk sac, they got to be able to feed on periphyton, have a certain salinity. Then as they go through their different growth stages, they got to have the right food chain and the right water chemistry that we just don't have here. Now there's several bodies of water, I think that I know of, there's two river systems where juvenile grass carp have been found. One of them, I'm not convinced that they spawned there, and that was the, oh gosh, I can't think of the river, whatever Lake Conroe is on. A decade ago, some Parks and Wildlife Fisheries Biologists claimed to have found some juvenile grass carp. Maybe they spawned there, but I've heard of no consequence of that since then. I kind of wonder maybe if a fish farm lost some into that river during a flood. And so chances are, Jason, I'll tell you this, they can't stand acid water like what you've got in North Cackalack. Ashley Barrett, what are some good ideas for homemade artificial habitat? Ashley, that's a great question. I'm going to tell you what I think. PVC pipe makes outstanding artificial habitat. Gravel beds make outstanding artificial habitat for fish to spawn. If you can take a 1-inch PVC pipe, drill a 1/2-inch hole through it, run some 1/2-inch PVC pipe through the holes, and create what looks like a PVC tree, you can put it in water. Fish are attracted to it, especially if it's dense with a lot of limbs, and the odds of you hanging up on that when you're fishing it are pretty low because the lure wants to go around the outside of that PVC pipe. Now, if you really want to get serious about it, sand down the PVC pipe before you put it in the water, before you put it together. Just get some heavy grit, 60 grit, and just sand down that PVC pipe, and algae will grow on it, so you can also create a food chain. But homemade artificial habitat, use concrete blocks, use PVC pipe, use brush piles, use rocks. I love rocks. That's my favorite thing to do. Tori Rose, do you bring up many catfish when doing electrofishing surveys? Yes, we do, if there are catfish. The thing about sampling when we're electrofishing, just whatever fish are in that zone, we're going to get them. So if there's very many catfish, then we're going to get a pretty big sample of catfish. Check out my Bob Lust Facebook page, and I think I put this on the Pond Boss Facebook page. My granddaughter Gentry and I, over the weekend, went down and we took some Purina Aquamax MVP, and I've been feeding some catfish and bluegill in a small pond. And man, they just tear the water up. You guys would enjoy that video. But if we were to put the electrofishing boat in that pond, we'd get more catfish than anything else. So it's all relative to how many are there. So electrofishing does get channel catfish, mudcats, bullheads, whatever. I mean, we were doing Richmond Mill Lake a few years ago and shocked up about a 35-pound flathead. Nobody had any idea that fish was in there. It's the only one I've ever seen since working on that lake since 2005, but we shocked it up. So Jason Nebstad says for his lake in North Carolina, so we should not be concerned that they're reproducing. No, not grass carp. Now, if a lake has common carp, they're going to reproduce. Common carp, that's what they do. Now, here's a little interesting tidbit. Common carp, German carp, were brought over by Teddy Roosevelt because of water in the Potomac River, because there was vegetation growing in the Potomac River. So he had some brought over on a ship, stocked in that river, and they have spread all over the United States. So common carp are actually an exotic species as well. They were brought over here. Now, in Europe, they're considered edible. Over here, they're considered trash fish. Ray Scott has told me 10 times, the father of bass fishing. Ray said, if a carp would jump, we'd never go fishing for a bass. He would have started, carp ASS or something back then, carp fishing. And so, but we consider them, they're kind of frowned upon as a fish that we really don't want to have around. So those can reproduce heavily. So know the difference between grass carp and common carp. Hey, an hour has flown by. I think I've tackled all the questions. I really appreciate you guys checking in. Subscribe to Pond Boss, please. $35 a year. It's a cheap date, and you get a whole lot of nuggets out of that deal. So we're knocking on the door at 7:30 next Wednesday. I'm going to do the best I can to. I'm going to be at the Purina farm. I'm going to try to broadcast from there. I haven't called them to set it up, but I'm going to call them tomorrow. So stay tuned to this Facebook page, and we will let you know. Dion Myers just ordered some MVP. Good call. All right, guys. Hey, thanks for tuning in. We will catch you next Wednesday, I hope. I'll let you know by the end of the week, which is day after tomorrow, if we're going to broadcast from the Purina farm. So until then, thanks for tuning in. We love you. See you later. Adios.